Call the meeting to order. Approve the meeting minutes from April 24th.
I'd like to say we take out line item number 4. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry, you skipped the agenda. Back to the agenda.
Special meeting.
Well, then
We just move through the agenda
why is it a special meeting?
because these dates weren't set at the beginning when we scheduled.
Says she said.
I think this is from Michelle. Yes.
So I'm gonna back and see if you can not have it as a special meeting.
I would move that we approve the regular meeting minutes from April 24th, 2025.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Public comment. Anybody on there for public comment? Gonna just bypass the discussion with hires because they are unable to attend tonight. And discussion on anything that somebody wants to bring up, talk about. I mean, I got in your discussion and action on committee recommendations, so.
I would say on prior, if any of us have questions now, it might help. For them to get ready. For example, at the last meeting, Chris and I brought up using the ed spec. Obviously, we know they're working on that, or they've been requested to. So that's one thing. I want to make sure, some other questions that they could work on. I think now would be the time if you got something.
I'm thinking since Carl, I assume that if they can be here next week, we'll meet. Carl won't be able to be here.
That's okay.
But no,
Right.
what I'm saying is I think it would behoove us to maybe spend a few minutes to put together, I don't know what to call it, a sub-agenda for that happens. So Fryer knows what roughly we're talking about when they come in. So they can be prepared and so we can be.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. So obviously comparing the square footage of the ed spec is one. Making sure Prior has that information to see what that, gets us to. So obviously we know Gildersleeve, the square footage, everybody says it's pretty much maxed out. Things like that. I want them to be able to go over everything with. Because that's a 3-grade school currently occupying about 48,000 square feet in that building, which is way over what the ed spec would call for. And I want to, see where they think there are excess space, which maybe there is. Sure, things like that I'd like to go over.
How long does it usually take you to get the minutes out?
I mean,
How long does it usually take you to get the minutes out?
depends how long the meeting is.
Sharon's fast.
I know you're-
Day or two.
Just thinking, trying to get this to them.
No, I think Dr. Bridge should make a phone call or somebody or you or whoever is on whoever.
Right, no, we make a phone call, have the actual list that we want.
Yeah, I don't think there's gonna be too many. I can only think of a few. I obviously, whatever decision we make, I want to make sure we are adhering to as close as we can to that ed spec. I think that is, Dr. Burton did an excellent job pointing out the priorities and what we're looking to achieve, no matter what we do, because some of what we are going to do is going to be renovation. We've already acknowledged that up here. Those are facts. So we have to make sure now, whatever we do moving forward with it, whatever buildings, it's going to at least, I would say, adhere to our ed spec for as close as possible, because I think this is going to be a sales pitch at the end, making sure we get all the staff on board, we make sure we get the Board of Education on board and the Board of Selectmen and all the residents of Portland Tech. So there's so many moving components here. I want to make sure, number one, we don't try to create something that will not meet our ed spec or is going to create major problems. I think that would be, moving backwards. So I want to make sure. And then,
So, question, Charles, on what we have to do here, the secondary school. That doesn't really require, does it require an ed spec? Not at all, right?
Yeah.
But that's pretty much just
So if that-
The ed spec would be what we were gonna do with the pre-elementary schools.
Correct.
Right?
Mhm.
Because this would be more repairs and stuff like that, and not looking to redesign this building in any way, shape, or form here, right? I just want to make sure I understand that.
Other than potentially if the Board of Ed is so inclined to move sixth grade up there, then there will be a tweak. But I agree with you. I think they're apples and oranges. I'm not trying to make a mountain out of a molehill, but that, I agree with you. Up here,
Up here?
Six.
sit over there.
Nothing tweak.
Well, the ed spec would have to be because it's in a different building.
Ed spec, yeah.
And
building.
no,
building
yeah, his question was over ed. Sorry.
Sixth grade up here?
I think you have plenty of,
Yeah, it's got nothing to do with sixth grade.
well, it would, as far as, making sure you have the proper OTPT, all the, whatever program. There are certain things in that ed spec that will have to be potentially shifted. I don't know if there is something used right now that sixth, fifth and sixth are sharing
You mean shifted out of? the
Yes.
other building?
out of whatever,
That's
what,
what you're-
there will be a
Okay,
tweak.
that is-
There will be a education, even goes for that. Assuming maybe in the future, but we have to.
I believe there is strong support for moving sixth grade up. I know there was on this committee. My understanding is there is on the Board of Education as well.
Okay.
Because I think folks see the benefit to kids and to space and cost in the town
Yes, and sports
and
Yeah.
sports and all of
yes,
that.
yes,
Yeah.
I believe the town's there.
It was part of the last plan and I think there is continued interest in making that happen. It's
I
been
agree.
part of our budget discussions.
Yep.
That we're not,
Yep.
ready to make that jump until there's a plan in place, but I think that there's absolutely support for that.
I should probably know this, but I'll ask it in sounds to the beginning. I believe one of the pitfalls of the last attempt at building. And it had nothing to do with building, but I think it was the additional money that was going to be asked for later for the secondary schools. Is what we're gonna put forward, the sum of money we're putting forward this time, secondary schools are included in, it, correct?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I wanted to make sure.
And I think we probably technically have to,
No, we don't have a choice. It's in our charge.
okay,
It's in our charge.
We
The
don't
guys
have-
go, the three things.
I agree, I totally agree with that.
Okay,
I'm just
so you
saying,
have to identify the issues with our facilities, no matter what facility it is. You have to identify the timeline that repair is needed, and we have to have fire audits. Oh, that's the other fire question, sorry. Fire has to help us with what reimbursements or potential reimbursements with whatever route. So up here, obviously, it's a capital. And I'm speaking for myself at this point, I believe our other buildings will probably be a capital, and then there's a potential, maybe we're renovating one to new or whatever the group comes up with. But there's going to be a need potential reimbursements on either scenario. So I think Friar should be prepared for that, because that is the charge in this. They're supposed to assist us on that.
Can I ask while we're talking about the high school piece of this, because again, it's our responsibility as a committee to make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen about how to move forward. I guess my question might really be for you, Bob, that, we did our work going through this Portland High School and Middle School list of capital improvements that are necessary and come up with, $18.5 million of improvements that we think are necessary at this complex over the next decade. My question is next step, how do we identify what is the top priority that we would be looking to include potentially in the next, in a bonding referendum, and what of that, how do we make the decision about what of that we would be looking to push further out? I guess my question really is about process.
Or even how do you hand this off to the Board of Ed or the Board of Selectmen without having to go through this process line item, so that they're not going through what you just went through with the budget referendum or with your budget meetings and let's add this, let's take this up, just did this and not having.
No, I think they have to trust the work that the committee did for numbers. Obviously, the members here can still look at what has been done on the Excel sheet on the site report, but it's my estimates based on going through this, and then we added some placeholders for things that we talked about related to technology and things like that, and it's in there. Some of the numbers. Members may feel that might be too high. They might want to reduce those numbers to get to a better number, but that's something that they're gonna have to take a guess at or a shot at, or maybe they have a better field of notes that are out there versus the estimates that I received. Obviously, my estimates, the budget estimates, the companies gave them to me weren't quite sure when the work was gonna be done, so they probably used about a 2-year rough estimate. Some of the stuff they were hoping that we would, well, we might be in a situation where we do it up here sooner than later without even that, just milestone
Right.
where things happen. But I think we got the total number. I think I mean, if the committee was gonna look at any numbers, they would need to look at that, and then we would, finalize that document. Those are capital improvements that we worked on. Those are numbers, and each one of those numbers that I shared with, and it's still there, each one of those numbers has an escalation portion that I separated from things that I felt that were numbers. That I was comfortable with, and we don't want to certainly include those in an escalation that we have to think about for 6 years. These are 6-year-old numbers. What is that percentage over 6 years? When you use 25%, what is that number that everybody feel comfortable with? And then, for instance, just to use for an example, if you were to look at Gildersleeve, our numbers came out to be, and remember, I took all of the potential reimbursement out of those numbers, put them all back in. So these are the highest left reimbursement. Because we wanted to kind of ask Fryer to categorize. That's a critical point, Carl, that has to be on their list. They have to help us with, if they're capital improvements at the school, which of those categories are reimbursable under the capital improvement. It's different than like a 28% overall. There could be HVAC, there could be roofing that falls into a 51% reimbursement, which I know roofing does, but there might be a few other items on here that do, and we want to make sure that he can help us capture that to make sure the percentage is correct.
That's what I was just gonna ask. I thought there's a way they could help us identify which of those items that the bigger bank could have.
Yeah, it could be 3 or 4 items that in there that, we could get 51% overall. I think 90% of the work is gonna be at 28, which that's kind of a state standard.
Capital.
For capital improvements, right, versus renovate to new, which would give us, depending on what percentages is as the town grows. And we do this work, we could be losing percents and be down into the 40s with those. But for instance, out of 14.4 million at Gildersleeve, with all the costs in there, 6.4 million of that money needs to be escalated. Because it's 6-year-old numbers. The big number. So you can't forget that, because that's like 1.6 million that we don't want to forget.
I think security was another one for reimbursement, but that's another great
Yep,
point.
it could be either.
Fire should give us the breakdown of what feels is reimbursable and whatnot. Actually, that's number 3 on the charge. Work with Fryer Architecture to identify eligible state reimbursements to coincide with the project. So that is there. Essentially, that's what we're paying for.
So just so I understand, you're thinking, we're not gonna be putting forward a recommendation to do that 18 million plus whatever escalation needs to go on there that's needed at the high school over the next decade. For us, we're looking to identify the highest priority items and.
There's $4.5 million reimbursement in that 18. I took it out.
Right,
We
right, yeah, no, I know, we're trying to clear it up.
So those numbers hopefully will come in even better.
Yeah.
They estimated a pretty high square footage. Who knows what it's gonna be by the time we get it done in a couple of years? I don't know. I do trust these guys, but that is a budget number, so there's probably a pretty good percentage contingency in there.
For which one?
On the.
Oh, yeah,
We talked about. Yeah, you're in the
Yeah.
30s,
I'm
50s.
I'm doing a roof in town. Or it's not a standard school. So I looked at the last 6 months of school bids for roofs and, it's double. Their estimates are double what any other school bids are. So that's a big amount of money.
So, I mean, you can make that recommendation that we take those down and take a 30% off it and keep a little caveat for time. And then that would bring your number down, and then you get a reimbursement on that too, but that would be up to this committee to decide, how strong they feel about reducing those numbers. You have some history with looking at some stuff that's going on, so that's better than just taking a stab at it and say that's too high, we're gonna drop it. So that's important.
You were talking about roof.
Yeah,
Yeah.
roofs themselves, all quotes that I have for the roofs.
Right, your roof quote remind me where it came from?
Garland,
Sir, it came from where?
Garland.
From Garland, yeah.
So what they did was they quoted it, as I mentioned before, I have it all in here. If anyone wants to look at any of the quotes that I have, they're definitely in this pile. But, you know, they quoted it as a 30-year watertight warranty, but they designed it as required by the Connecticut state and local codes, as well as the OSHAR, which is OSCRG. And it has to do with the guidelines for any reimbursement. So some of those are a little tighter, but then again, it shouldn't double. You know, it shouldn't jump the square footage price by.
Yeah, and I'm not looking at specs, I'm looking at numbers and, you know, they were fairly consistent. For each individual bid, it could range 70% depending on the low, but I mean, it was fairly consistent. That goes back through 24.
So right there, you know, we have some opportunities there.
That's a good question for fire too, to see what they're seeing on similarly sized.
So you know, you have a document here with square footage and it consists of some design work and engineering work. But we can certainly take those numbers with a more reasonable square footage and just change. It's a pretty easy way to back into a quote.
That just hit me because I'm doing one on one of my buildings right now. Just seemed real high.
Where I think you are. Because like, there's a couple of things that are difficult about what Bob's saying. Like, as I look at the work this committee's done, I think there is unanimous consent on this committee to move the 6th grade to the middle school. I think there's unanimous consent on this committee to not close the secondary school, right? And that, much like the facility study committee, because I shared the memo with you, the savings that we could generate by closing one elementary school, I believe that there's unanimous support on this committee to take any savings from a consolidation, apply those savings to start working on the secondary school and bond some money in addition to that savings, so that and then of course, when you start paying back on, move that money back out of capital over to debt service. I believe there's unanimous consent on those things. So I already see the committee having 3 unanimously supported recommendations. Recommendation 1, move the 6th grade up. Recommendation 2 sounds like decommission 1 elementary school. Recommendation 3, apply the savings from that decommissioning for 3 years, chip away at secondary school projects, and then borrow some money in addition in the bond to finish those projects at the secondary school, with the idea that you would then move that money out of capital back over to debt service when you have to start paying the note on the bond. I believe there's unanimous support on this committee for that.
Was the other way to do it.
Right. So I think what Bob and I would have to do, and we can sit down with fire or OPM or somebody, is the difficulty there is going to be saying, all right, look, we're seeing this in a 3-year process. Year 1 will have $800,000 plus the 500 from top, we'll have $1.1 million. Year 2 will have $1.1 million. Year 3 will have $1.1 million. And then over the course of those 3 years, we'll have access to, I'm making a number, however much we got on for this. OPM, fire, whomever, over that 3 to 4 year period with those numbers, prioritize our projects for us. Using Sightlines, Bob's expertise to bring us that plan. We haven't done that work yet, but I think that clearly that's the work ahead that we've got to do over the summer once this committee is going to make recommendations to the board and the board's like that. Are we all on the same page with those things? I think those are the low hanging fruit ones. Clearly, I know the facility study committee agreed on those, and sounds like I'm seeing now you all see the wisdom in 6th grade applying. So the agreement is move 6th grade, decommission 1 school, apply savings from overhead to chip away at secondary projects through capital, and then move capital over to debt service once the bond comes available.
And this, you had a brief conversation about the funding, sort of.
I think the consensus, I mean, honestly, the consensus on board Charging with that. I mean, I think the board was ready to do it, but then unfortunately we had to meet the bottom line and it kind of faded away, but there still is the desire.
And a lot of this was interesting. See, we're gonna make the recommendations. It's really up to the Board of Ed and the selectmen to act on those recommendations. Right? So you got three. So you got three clear things everybody agrees to. One, sixth grade. Two, decommission one elementary school. Three, use overhead savings and borrow some amount of money for the secondary school. Do the work with an operations project manager or an architect to figure out over a 3 to 5 year period how you use those funds to best address the $18 million worth of projects at the secondary school. And of course, just as a side note here, I'm praying still that out of this legislative session, we're going to get another round of the HVAC grant funding. Right? We're going to have to look closely at what's coming out of Hartford. There's lots of conversation about we need to leverage our dollars here against what the state will give us in the way that maximizes our ability to keep the mill rate down and address the needs of the secondary school. The hard part now for this group, I think, I don't know if you're ready to discuss it, but if there is unanimous support for closing elementary school, okay. If there's not, I think you should talk about that. But if there is, okay. The tough one is I haven't heard yet which one. Right. I think that's still the elephant in the room right in front of us. Is Valley View, Gildersleeve, or Brownstone. Which do you want to decommission? To me, it seems like you got to make that decision because then you can focus on the two remaining schools in terms of renovate to new capital projects, what grades are going to be in those, what we would need to do. Now that we've removed 1/3 of our elementary schools off of our to-do list, what then is Brownstone going to be a pre-K2 school? Or is Gildersleeve going to be the pre-K2 school, or is Valley View going to be the pre-K2 school? And then which is going to be the 3-5 school? I think that to me, it seems like that's the discussion that is going to be the most difficult, but also the most consequential, because until you make that decision, I think we're chasing our tail a little bit.
I'll start by, that's the reason we want Fryer. Through the numbers, and I'll just say it like it is. If the numbers are needed to be 46,000 square feet at Valley View, and it currently doesn't have that, and we then need a non-reimbursable $6 million addition, we would be over the square footage that the state says we're allowed. So that would be non-reimbursable. These are the decisions we need to know that information in order to make decisions. So I don't believe we can make any decision without knowing what our ad spec says we need for square footage. Then we can decide what building and which one would function in a manner, because there's two things you have to look at. One's if we're just renovating the building, that's one thing. That's a little bit easier. Bob would probably argue with that, but if we just renovate one of our buildings and renovate to new, it's easy. You just say, hey, make that the right square footage and whatever, and we just kind of brush it off. So there's a huge difference. Like we already understand Gildersleeve could function as a pre-K and up with the bathrooms and the piping and blah, blah, blah. We could do some renovations and get it to that. We understand Valley View could do the same, but it's probably too small. And we understand Brownstone is big. And if we're not going for state reimbursement, then it's almost irrelevant because for all the big ticket items, HVAC, security. So we need to know the numbers. So we're to the number point, Charles. I think all of us need to see the numbers, what they are. What is potentially reimbursable? And we can make a fair decision on what building. Because I have my mind 100%. I need to know all that information to really get me to the finish line to make sure this is a big deal for our town. And I think Fryer is going to help us tremendously. So we need to know square footage, what is potentially reimbursable. So what package is better, what building we might want to renovate, what building we might want to renovate to new. We're not going to make that decision. And if you make a decision on what building to close prior to knowing all this, you may make the wrong decision. We could easily close the wrong building by accident, and I don't want to be doing that.
Let's not forget. We're all here with the understanding that we need to give the voters a reasonable number. And I thought that was part of the reason we were going through on line items, was to try to find places to save. And I think, I agree with you. I mean, Briar has to provide us with that information. We really have to figure out, looking at each of these buildings, where can it not only get back, but where can we save in each of these buildings? And then and as I brought up many meetings ago, the question I asked was looking at the usable square footage according to the state. Realistically, it would seem to be Valley View and Gildersleeve. But the other aspect of this is, this is where, much like you, this is where I'm torn. Because if the object is to get rid of a building to save costs. But if, for argument's sake, we decide that the building we're not going to use for school purposes is this. But we pretty much know the town, most folks in town don't want to get rid of that building. Then we're not getting it off of the books. And there's still a cost factor there. And then we have to look at, somebody has to look, Board of Selectmen has to look at what other avenues can you do to make that at least a net zero building. But in terms of cost.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Charles, the decision has to be made, but I think coming into this week, I thought the discussion with Fryer was gonna start tying up those loops. I think that's what we said.
So for 4 years, John, we've been doing this and there's been no one that's talked about how to make it net zero. We had a whole, I can go back to all the minutes and the Board of Select charge committees, multiple committees. Committee that worked here with Lou for a good solid 3.5 years. I was part of the back end of it. We had a committee that looked at repurposing. And I had one of the best reports I've seen out of town. And we still don't have anybody talking about it. But it's all there.
But it is there. And
The numbers are there too. The numbers are there.
The vision that I talked about before, the vision that I still have, but I don't know if it would work for the town, is to utilize the old Portland High School, the historic building for town purposes. Using extra space, maybe move the food bank there, do whatever we need to do. But if you kept that building and you had it on the first floor and the second floor, if you could put double fire doors going down those halls on the first and second floor and lease out that back L, top and bottom. You've got some, I think there's some savings to the town on the roof with the solar. And if there's a way that you could leverage that entire first and second floor, I don't know what's there, 20 plus 18 classroom in a lease. I mean, that's just one possibility, but I can't believe, I mean, information is out. I just think people are waiting for a decision, unfortunately, decisions to be made to determine what they're gonna do. What do they do with that? And then if that building is gonna be an anchor that we're gonna put around the neck of the town, then that's where the discussion comes in, whether that building falls in as one of the buildings that we utilize for school purposes.
Yeah, there's only one, it's my opinion, and I won't change my opinion because I look at that building over and over. I don't think it's gonna go away. I agree with you because I think there's too much potential for the building for town usage or in the minds of the taxpayers, and that's fine. So they decided that they're gonna pay for that in their own minds. Okay. I think if that building is not used for education, I think at a bare minimum, it needs $3 million worth of work. It needs a new service of electricity into that building so that we can actually air condition individual office areas that might be used for leasing and or town departments. Those town departments would be Park and Rec, youth services, the food bank, social services. You could lease it. I think if you did that, the town would have at least 3 years to And you're talking this could be 5 years from now, by the time they'd get access to that building. It's gonna have new boilers. At that point, I think that they're gonna have to use it to see if they can manage to get enough return in revenue to be a net zero, or maybe it costs a little bit, but it's not a lot. There's no way to predict that. So if that building stays, it needs at least $3 million to make it usable for leasing.
Yeah.
Air condition some rooms, you do that with, you need to put, you gotta upgrade the power. You're not gonna have one single air conditioner in there without blowing fuses on an entire wings. It's that bad. I got asked today about the music room. And I said, well, it's not even hot yet. And they said, well, it isn't there because they're blowing hot air all
No
day.
windows, right.
Trumpets and
Too much.
so, but you're right, so, but that's my plan. If that building is not gonna be used for education, this committee goes in that direction based on the numbers here. We have to either agree to them or not. I don't have any issues with them being changed. They're different than fires. They're a little more expensive than his in some aspects because we added some things that weren't even involved there. So I don't think he's gonna give you any capital numbers other than what he already did. That's kind of working off the sidelines. We went deep. So we have to decide, you know, if you take out all the 51 percenters and just use a 28% number, you have to add a couple $1 million or $1.5 million into these schools for escalation, right? So you're starting off at Gildersleeve being a $13 to $14 million. It's a being at 10 million at 28%. We might be able to go to 9 million because we might get some things that are 51%. Who knows? But you're at Valley View at 12 million, you're down to 8.5. These are all capitals. The biz is at 12 million, you're back to 8.5. So we kind of know where we are with this capital. Maybe low. But now you have to kind of look at what we were offered to renovate to new, and you really see that it's in cost there, and we have to decide which one can we afford. But by doing that, we have to pick I mean, we have all the schools to look at, so you have to figure out which one's gonna be the most expensive, maybe take the longest, and then what could we do with it if we don't use it as a school?
Let me, while we're in the conversation, let me just ask this question. In whatever two schools we decide to go with and through, there is going to be that period of time, as we talked about the last meeting, where we're gonna need to move some kids around.
Yeah.
Is there a benefit? Is there one scenario that benefits us in terms of what space we have to move the kids to in that transition? And I think that's something we need to consider when we decide which building we get rid of. If the building we're setting aside is a building that has plenty of space, so we can move the kids. I mean, maybe that's one of the things we look at.
I think one of the more important things to remember is a couple things moving forward. Again, a lot of numbers is you never want to pigeonhole yourself into a corner where we barely meet the square footage requirements.
Right.
And you have to remember, we're now considering everything below 6th grade to have no auditorium in that scenario. I think it's really important to remember if under a scenario, Valley View is obviously smallest square footage, probably the smallest bill if we decided to do something to it and turn it into Park Rec, turn it into potentially the PD in the future, maybe a school in 15 years, that would be where a new big school would be built. We'd still own it. And in the interim, we would still have a lot of extra square footage at the Brownstone, according to Fryer. Spare classrooms, if we end up going to an all-day pre-K. There is no scenario where Valley View Gildersleeve without a major addition is going to give you any of that. You will not have an auditorium. You will have no swing space extra. You will have no extra space. It will be literally right down to the wire. And then if we do, which I anticipate there's going to be growth in Portland, I hope, for our school system, you will have no options, but mega $1 million in additions. I don't believe that's necessarily the best way to go. So at this point, I think the two viable options would be Gildersleeve, Brownstone, based on you still have an auditorium, still spare square footage. I believe Valley View is going to come in under what is required to even function as any scenario. Unless it's going to be Valley View, Brownstone, but then you're putting you know, right to Main Street, and I know most people were concerned about that, but if it's Valley View, Gildersleeve on Route one, you're maxed. We're gonna see that from Friar. So these are gonna be these are the discussions we gotta have Friar in order to make these. I mean, they're gonna be big. There's gonna be no easy decision. I don't think any, this is a slam dunk simple.
Can I just ask a quick question? I'm curious about one thing. So one, I mean, I've sat here and watched, right? You have the numbers on capital for each of the 3 elementary schools and the secondary school. So Manager Bob, thank you for doing that. Don't forget, you got from Mike and Bryce when they stood up here. The 2 scenarios, how much would it cost for renovate to do? How much would it cost to renovate to do Gildersleeve to create a 3-5? You have that. You also got how much would it cost to renovate to new Gildersleeve to create a K2, and how much would it cost to renovate to new Brownstone? Remember those, and part of those were Mike looking at the space standards and talking about ripping parts of buildings off. Remember that? Everybody was like, oh no, we're not doing that. Oh my God, we started ripping off parts of Brownstone in front of this community. Could you don't you remember that? That was about 8 weeks ago now. So to me, you've got the number on how much it would cost to renovate to new Valley View. You got the number on how much it would cost to renovate to new Gildersleeve. You've got the number on how much it would cost to renovate to new Brownstone. You've got the number on how much it would cost to do capital improvements on Valley View. You've got the number on how much it would cost to do capital improvements on Gildersleeve. You've got the number on how much it would cost to do capital improvements on Gildersleeve. What else do you need?
We questioned the numbers. We questioned, I'll walk you through the last meeting again, just in case, because what you just said now, I must respond with. We went through your ed spec. Your ed spec looks like Valley View will need about 47,000 square feet. Friar has it around 40. That would be between $6 and $7 million difference to the taxpayers. You just stated we have the numbers. We questioned the numbers and would like answers from Friar.
You get that answer. Renovate to is totally different. Got the inside of the building, your square footage changes, and you have to build your classroom based on the same.
That's what I went by.
You talked about.
That's what I went by.
That's exactly right.
We went by Dr. Brady.
Like square footage, you didn't.
Which matches the state.
Advertising existing school layout inside.
No, I did. Our ed spec says how much square footage it.
You built the inside of the school.
All right, ready?
Did you divide the classrooms up?
Yes, so that maybe Dr. Britton,
Well,
the one to go through. We all understand. Hang on.
I had a problem.
But I
figuring
just-
out space.
I
didn't space to get versus the cafeteria. Classrooms are easy, but
So you keep referencing an ed spec, but the.
We gotta
thing
get an
is, then
answer.
there is no ed spec for
Pre-K
pre-K2
No.
value. There is no. ed
There
spec.
is an ed spec for every grade that we have in the town of Portland that states the square footage required for each classroom, for the nurse, for the principal, for the janitor closet actually has a square footage in the state spec. So I went through everything and I was able to add them all up. They're Dr. Britton's documents. They state what we need as a district for every single thing, OT, PT, special needs, every bridge program, you name it, it has a square footage associated with it.
You're talking about a plan for a pre-K5 school. So the needs are a little bit different. And what Mike Serrano and Bryce have told us is that it is feasible with the allowable square footage to design a school that meets our needs. They said that.
You know, it's also that they've never made a plan that didn't fit whatever school district needed. They've always done it 100% of the time. So why would Portland be any different?
And by the way, I spoke with Mike, I called him, asked me to see if he was coming tonight, and I did, and he said he couldn't make it tonight, and I said, again, Mike, I just want to be clear, what's blown some of our minds is that you're saying that you could fit second grade in Valley View with, based on what you showed us 8 weeks ago now, one of our first meetings, right?
1,200 square feet.
Relatively small addition on the gym to create a stage, and it would be an auditorium. It would be a cafetorium or a gymatorium. A combined space with the small area. And I said, and that's kind of blowing our minds because we're like, how are we gonna fit 6 more classrooms in that square footage with only that relatively small area of the back? And he said, Charles, I absolutely promise you, it will fit. If you gut it, create a blank canvas, literally, that's what Renovate to New is, like, gut it. Blank canvas, and then start your walls up, just drywall and framing. That's what he said. And create the classroom. Now, yes, is it true that teachers wouldn't have the enormous class sizes that they have at that? Yes, that is true.
Some teachers.
Some teachers would have much smaller class sizes than they have now. Some would have the same. And it might mean you have an entire room for a special education teacher. You would have more of a space. You wouldn't have an entire room for OT or multi-language learners or ML support or interaction support. Because you only meet with small groups of kids. Per this, they would be smaller, but he reiterated it to me today. In terms of the existing square foot, if you got that, he said it to me, I am convinced the numbers I shared with you 8 weeks ago and that design are good. You'll have enough space there.
The number he gave us though is 41,125 based off of, that's maximum reimbursement from the state. The 41,125 based on the number of kids that we have. And the state goes off of 25 children in a classroom. We don't. So we're looking at 18.2. There's a discount there. He's got to explain it to me because I don't see how you're going to do it based on what the Board of Ed
Right,
wants
it-
for children in
it's-
the classroom.
But I would say that, and yeah, just to push the conversation. He will explain that to you in a far better way than I would, right? Like, I can't do it, you know, I can't do it. He's the architect, he's done millions of dollars of work in South Windsor. We can go visit the schools right now. He not only could come here with Bryce and answer those questions, but I can't. He could put us in a car and drive us to a school and show us if that's what you're interested, but maybe it's, you haven't even made a decision about whether Valley is going to continue to be a school.
Because we don't know if the numbers work. We don't know if it's viable. And I'll give you a few more examples. I trust but verify everything I've done in my life, Dr. Britton. All I'm stating is the document you handed us, in which I want to point out, all but 2 things were very good and accurate. There are 2 discrepancies with the state of Connecticut. We'll talk about that later. The state of Connecticut also gives the recommended size. That is part of the reimbursement. So I went and compared everything that you have in your spec, and you did an excellent job. I want to say that. But there are things in here that Friar needs to know. For example, the physical therapist needs 500 square feet. He's going to show me a building that has that. Language needs 400. He's going to show me that. Special education needs 400. So on. Every grade has a square footage per classroom. We've already said how many classrooms. We've got that worked out. So there is no more argument. So from the 5th, ages 5 to 10, they're 1,200 square feet per classroom. We already know how many there are. We're going to sit here and add it all up. We're going to find out what that number is. Once we've identified that number, and if that number is what Friar says, so be it 40,000, we make work. I'm not here to cause problems. If it comes up to be 46 or 47,000, herein lies the problem. We may have accidentally then discussed which school to close based on false information, just like we were told the biz was 68,000 square feet when it wasn't. I'm not going to do that. All I want to do is verify these numbers. Friar can do it. You can't, I can't. We're going to work as a group. We're going to get to the finish line, and it is what it is. I have no horse in the race other than I'm not going to prove something that isn't going to work for the town. So using the ed spec, Chris did his own. We're both coming up with between 46 and 47,000 square feet. Friar's coming up with 40. No problem. It's going to be pretty quick to figure out. One of us 3 to 0. No problem.
And I would just say this, if I were to encourage this committee and all these questions, and all in any of those discussions, Mike and Bryce gave you a number for Renovate to New Valley View 8 weeks ago. Correct me if I'm wrong. I wish I had it in front. I wish I brought. I think it was like 42 million,
Correct.
right? With
2 million.
21 million reimbursement. That's the number. Not if it doesn't mean. I would encourage you. He's done $1 million worth of school work. He could put us in a car and show us $42 million with 51% reimbursement from the state. That's how much it'll cost.
And to prove my point, Dr. Burton, if we ask him to, that'll be the only thing that it costs out of Portland is $21 million to build that school to match our ed spec. I can assure you it will never get signed.
For the benefit of the remaining part of the meeting. Since we're just gonna wait for next meeting.
Yeah.
Let's just assume that Friar's correct, just for the sake of the conversation, since we're not.
Why don't we just add up the numbers?
Just a second, because could we, like, you were to do a basic SWOT analysis of the schools. There are other things to consider also besides just the budgetary stuff. Like, so for example, there are strengths, weaknesses of Big Brownstown, for example, that have nothing to do with numbers, because it's clearly a very expensive school, but we're still considering it, even though there's a whole lot of reasons we shouldn't, but we have to, because the town wants us to, right? Similarly with the other schools, we don't even have to have that discussion about square footage right now. Could we just put that aside for, just have a few minutes and maybe just think about just basic SWOT stuff? Would that be helpful just to, because like I'm a visual person, like I'm thinking like all the stuff about Valley View, and you're right about the negative part about that small, even whatever becomes cafeteria or it's still a weakness. It's still a weakness of that area, but that's the size of the outdoor space is like a huge strength of it. We've all agreed on. So, and the location. So we are clearly, and we're weighing these priorities, which we can't help but weigh. So I just want to make sure we're including all the other stuff besides just the budget stuff, because they're all surprisingly close.
I think I'm gonna make a copy of this for everyone, right? And this is what Mike tweeted out 8 weeks ago. Scenario 1, Valley View pre-K 2 Gildersleeve 3.5 plus to Portland $40,311,235. Scenario 2, Gildersleeve pre-K 2 Brownstone 3.5 cost to Portland $43,108,000. Scenario 3, Valley View pre-K 2 Brownstone 3.5 $44,488,509. Those are the numbers I would encourage you to consider all your confidence. Now, Brett, to your point, the difference between 40, 43, and 44 is important. It's important, I get it, but so are all of those other priorities. And that's what I do, man. I'll stop talking. If I can talk, I don't want to talk. This is your town. You are the group that needs to make this decision. I'm just here to advise. But I just want to remind the committee of one thing. The Facility Study Committee and the board rank ordered the importance of those priorities. Costs is not the number one priority. Number one priority is high quality academic space that promotes a positive school culture, HVAC, security, student safety. Those things were more important, I believe, to a lot of us than the difference between 43 and 44. And to me, if this committee says we better meet those priorities at the 44 level, well, that's a difference of $4 million. Is $4 million bonded over 30 years going to break the bank? Probably not. So I'm just saying I agree with you. I'll make a copy of this right now. I think these are the numbers you look and consider. They're not that far apart.
You're right, but I also think you need to consider, and I think it's equal. I do believe if we do renovations, we've already discussed, they're going to meet or exceed everything that is expected of us.
I'll make a copy
So
much faster.
the numbers should also include, I'll give you, and I'll just talk about it.
But it comes to when we're choosing a building.
Right, I'll give you an example. If you go with any one of those scenarios where there's 2 renovate to new, we already just heard the number. There's putting on a referendum, approximately one of them is 44 million, so that's 88 million plus up here. You think we're gonna put 100 million on a referendum?
You're gonna keep it.
Yeah, I'll turn bright red in a few minutes if we keep going that route. At the end of
The other thing that frightens me is Charles just brought up that same number again. 30 years.
Right.
That was one of the things that people didn't do.
Correct.
People are being asked to come up with money to do upgrades to a building that is 20 years old.
Yep.
And then you're asking them to pay for 30 years. The costs, I'm sorry,
Excellent.
the committee came up with those line items and put those items in that format was before the vote. And yeah, and I'm not saying those aren't important, but I think the vote spoke that day. We had this vote, and I think money is important. And I said this at the last meeting, I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. I'm sitting on this board as a representative of the Board of Select. I have more of a holistic view of what we're trying to do here. I'm a product of this school system, and so are my kids. My parents are guys. And I want the best for our kids. But I also understand that if we sink this town, we put another astronomical number, 30-year bond assigned to it. And God help us, if we get people to vote for that, then we need a new fire truck. We need a new plow truck. We need anything. Nobody's going to vote for it. And that's the harsh reality here. This, and I said this way back when. This is like having a mortgage payment, owning a house, and have 3 kids who want to go to college. It's the same discussion that I had with my kids years ago when we also were paying mortgage. It's a very difficult thing to do, but somehow we have to take the previous committee and their recommendations. We have to look at them. We have to look at them a little bit differently now, because we're approaching this from, whether you like it or not, from a dollars and cents approach. If we weren't thinking about dollars and cents, we wouldn't have spent weeks going line by line by line through all those schools and walking through all those schools to see what we had. If we go back in and we say, okay, we can blame it on the economy, we can blame it on tariffs, but if we go back to the citizens of this town, now saying we're going to do 2 schools instead of 1 school, and we go back with a number that's bigger than before, we wasted our time.
I agree. You brought up a lot of excellent points. And I think it's, we've got the reality is if we want to come up with a lower number, it will be renovations. And that is a fact. I'm not making it up. If you want a lower number than, and I think you said so many excellent things. We need to sell, and I think this has to start with Dr. Brett.
What's that going to be adding in the high school?
Well, no, hang on.
It's not necessary.
It may not necessarily, but I have, when I say lower, I mean, I already added that,
Yeah.
but excellent point, Brett. I think part of this is a sales issue. I think, Dr. Britton, you've, from the beginning, you brought points about renovate to new, you brought up points, well, if we only renovate 1 school to new, then I might get a grievance, I believe was one of your quotes in one of the meetings, because the other school won't be up to the same standard. That was what, no, he said that in one of the meetings. And I think the reality is, if we're going to start discussing renovate, there's nothing wrong with that. I think people, especially staff members, need to realize that there's a major bonus in square footage to them. We don't have to lop off 8,000 at 6,000 or 8,000 at Gildersleeve if we were to renovate that. So there's added bonuses to not doing renovate to new. We don't necessarily need to lose a whole wing. And if that's the angle we're going, it's going to be a completely different mindset. We're going to need to put money in for somebody to manage the whole project. It's a completely different animal. It's not going to be Bob making a list of what to fix.
Because the state's making, there's nothing to do with who's here to do it. You're getting mandated to do that.
Yep, it's
You're
going to
gonna
be.
need that 15-page document from GAS.
So you keep saying, capital, doing this on a capital budget.
I said
capital-
potential.
Potential
Yeah,
capital.
yeah.
How do we lock all of that needs to be done into a capital plan that really is gonna be different than a renovated new? I'm confused on that, because I know I've worked here a long time. if we think that we're gonna go in and say, okay, and I'm just throwing years out there, okay? In 2027, we need X amount of money. 2029, we need X amount of money. Without bonding that, I mean, if you can do. It's a, you get sense of what I'm saying.
You're gonna bond it, but the price is gonna go up. as
Right.
you do projects.
Suggesting.
No.
capital improvement.
No,
That scares me.
and it's not from with you, you're.
They're never gonna get it.
And true, so.
Yeah, you, this group may not wanna go capital, they will on some of the buildings, but they're not on all of them, maybe they want renovated, whatever. My point is, any of the capital ones, we need to come up with a dollar, it needs to get bonded. To Bob's point, with escalation, depending on where it falls, and I do believe if we were to go, pretend you did everything, we wanna drive the numbers down. 3 to 4.
Phases.
Yeah, I'm with Bob,
If
I
you-
would have said 4, but Bob
If you're looking.
got a bunch of, I do. My point is, that would be, but the money needs to be there, Carl, because we've kicked the can. We go to bond, if we're going, and I know we are going that route on at least up here, maybe another building, I don't want to get ahead of myself. Maybe this board wants to renovate one to new, whatever. I'm not here to split hairs over that, but my point is, any renovation, we still are gonna need a feasible process, even up here. We may not, we're not gonna do everything in 1 year. It may be like
No,
Bob said.
you can't, you can't.
It may be 3 years, or 4 years, whatever it is, but
We
that.
need to start calling it renovations as opposed to capital, because I do.
I just.
If I missed, I do apologize. I don't.
I was misleading.
Okay.
I think it was just, let's all make sure that we're on top
Just
of
to
it.
understand.
Yeah.
And we're coming in with a number,
Yes.
whether it's capital, whether it's
Renovate
renovated.
and maybe it's
Whatever. It is going to be a number that
Is,
you are requesting
yes.
Right, bonding.
Yeah.
or to be bonded, so we know that we're guaranteed to get that money. And there's gonna have to be, if we do
Yes.
the capital way, or whatever you wanna call it, renovate is nice, whatever.
Yeah.
We're gonna have
Yeah.
to do that financially to know that we're getting that money. Obviously, we're never gonna be able to do all these projects at once because we just can't shut all 3 buildings down and tell the kids to come back in 3 years. We can't do that. I should say.
And there may be a value.
It's all-
I'll be the first, there may be a value to rent, I'll use Gildersleeve as an example, there may be a value to renovate Gildersleeve to new or whatever. I don't believe there's a value to renovate Brownstone to new because it's too big square footage, this is what I'm seeing so far. And I think that phrase is just not right for a 1932 building, I just believe that's a thing. And nor would you wouldn't necessarily wanna, but back to my original comment, I think whatever we do, whatever building, we've already decided, I think, and I don't want to speak for everybody, they're gonna have air conditioning, they're gonna have all the security issues, they're gonna address everything Dr. Britton did an excellent job on spelling out and the Board of Education gave for priorities. I think we can meet that, no matter what it is. So whether certain projects maybe renovate to new, certain maybe renovate to nice, at the end of the day, like up here is not getting renovated to new. We're going to fix what we need to.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
You just said something that caught my breath a little bit.
Okay.
You said you don't see a scenario where this committee recommends renovating Brownstone to new.
Renovation, yes, renovate to new, because if you look at renovate, you're gonna get the best dollar, because first of all, I went through the list, there's a couple million I want to shave off of it and discuss tonight. But and I think Bob would probably agree with me. You get the best square footage use for the town and the Board of Education, because it has its own dedicated auditorium. It has extra space when we get in trouble, and the town can't afford, because now pretend we do a 30-year, and I agree with John pointing out 30-year may have been one of the sticking points for the residents. I don't believe that's a good good bonding issue, once again, maybe not our issue.
That's the only thing I was gonna say, that's not our issue, that's on you and the board of selectmen to make that decision for the community about what town can afford to pay.
Council's gotta
And
figure
on
that
how-
out.
I also want to
A public meeting.
I'll be the guys right on the tip right now. The reality is, we do need to discuss it from a numbers perspective as a group. We have no vote in it, Laura. I agree with you.
And I don't know that it even belongs in our recommendation.
No, but we have to look at everything in its totality, especially if we want this to pass. I think everybody here has a great heart, truly wants a good outcome for the town of Portland. I've seen it. I'm really impressed with this whole group. I really mean that. Whatever the outcome is. At the end of the day, we still have to have a completed project. And when I say completed, to Bob's point, if the brownstone was the one that, or to John mentioned, if that became a town, this, or that, we have to show something that's feasible. And if it's Valley View becomes Park and Rec and maybe something else, we have to show it's feasible. I know, I understand we are not the final say on it. And that's one of the reasons right before we vote, I do believe we should bring in Board of Ed in case they have a couple of things they want us to tweak, bring in Board of Selectmen, because once we vote, it's over. But I do believe we have to look at it in its totality in order to get this passed with the voters.
Is that one country? Because you have 100. I agree with you about Brownstone being renovated. And I say that because I sat on the facility study committee. If you remember, the facility study committee's recommendation was for Brownstone to go 4-6 school and renovate to new, but that's where it was. But give the basement and the auditorium to the town, and square foot is too big. It's too big to do that in a cost-effective way. Now, Ben, going back to where Brett was, I have concerns that turning a 1930s high school into a 2030 elementary school without a renovation to new, from an education perspective, is simply not.
You use the auditorium as a strength, and I'm like, the auditorium is beautiful, but it's a weakness as the elementary school. It's not, you can't do anything with it for a third, fourth, and fifth grade. It's not appropriate. Like it's great for a meeting house for the town, but it's a museum, which you can't do anything with elementary school, because we'd have to do something. We have to put investment into it that we haven't calculated into Brownstone yet. Like, those are the things we're not thinking about. That's why I wanted to kind of do a SWOT. We're kind of running out of time, but I wanted to like a SWOT and just talk about like what you see as a strength versus like from an educator's side, what we see as strengths, because I think there's like we're crossing paths in the wind kind of thing. Like,
and part of it,
like I walk into Brownstone, which I love, but I see lockers that the third grader is not going to reach, like, because they're built into all their high school lockers, and we haven't calculated that, and there's like the soft cost that we just haven't built in yet, and like all the stuff that's on the priority number 2 of it really is it's a high school still, and how do we fix that? That we wouldn't, I'm not saying we wouldn't.
I'm not to pick on both of you for stating this, but I want to be clear for the record. The additions were built to elementary school standards. They were not built to high school standards. Most of the high school wing is not utilized for classrooms, just so we're clear. So that is not a fair argument.
Yeah.
It's gonna have to be fixed. It's something that has to.
Right, library, the offices, those are all I'm saying in the original high school wing. They have the labs, they have the the library, they have all the principal.
The classrooms.
Yes. So a lot of that wing that we keep calling the original high school, built originally. There are some, yes, they're not, the majority of those have been switched to other things. The back wing that was built to elementary school standards, the two wings, the two additions that were built top and bottom, those are the same lockers. Those are fine. Those are, and the whole L was built to elementary standards. So I just want to make sure the taxpayers and us and Dr. Britton, because he said it a few times now, that we understand what we're talking, and the auditorium, we just had a in there with the children, and I thought it worked out great. So I don't know what renovations you think are needed, but I would love to hear it. But
So I'm just gonna throw this last number out, and then I promise you I'll never talk numbers again. So one thing for John, okay, there will be nothing. Somebody's talking. So I don't think we'll get anywhere in this town unless we commit the whatever savings that we have towards the bond.
Yes.
You were not ever look at a 30-year bond if we committed the money that we said we were gonna save towards a bond. I can off the top of my head tell you right now that 1.2 will save you 18 million in a bond if you have that cash. 17 million in a bond, 4.5%. So
Yeah.
we talked about this 8 weeks ago. We have to make, this committee needs to know if this town is gonna make a commitment to use the portion of the savings that we have through consolidation to help pay this bond off, so that the balance of that bond or the balance of that money is the only thing the taxpayers need to pay. That is gonna make a huge difference.
Yes.
If it's 8 million over 20 years,
I'll.
if it's 10 million,
For the board,
over
I'm
20
20
years.
for the board of
So,
selectmen, and I will say
that's
this
important for us.
everybody, board of selectmen, also board of education, also everybody. The education of the public. We did a piss poor job.
Yeah.
The last
We
time,
missed that.
that's why it failed. There were, and that.
Speak into the microphone.
But let's be realistic. That is, there were so many people that went to that vote with so many questions. Social media stirred up more questions. People wanted to know why it was 30 years. They wanted to know why we weren't addressing the secondary school costs at the same time. People felt like they were being sold a bill of goods. And I talked to a lot of people and everybody had a different perception, but the perception was they knew they didn't understand it. And that's why if we do nothing else in this group, and that's part of the reason I don't want to feel pressure to make a decision, because we need to sell this.
Yeah.
And even if we don't sell it, people need to be able to call up these meetings when we made the decision, and they need to feel like the decision that we're making is being made intelligently, that all of the issues that people have concerns about are on top of mind with us having this discussion. And that's the reality. The numbers, I agree with you, I mean, if the 30-year bond was sold differently, we probably would have been all right, but it wasn't. And that's the unfortunate reality of this. It was,
But I don't think that's an issue of the committee.
no, but I was on record with the Board of Selectmen. I was the only guy that voted to accept that previous plan. And I said, we do not need to accept the plan and take it verbatim. But I said, we have a year and a half or 2 years. If we accepted that plan, use it as a starting point to educate the public and have the open and honest discussions. By the time we went to the polls, we might have gone with the polls exactly what we went with, but people would have understood. And some of the discussions we had here, just how the state works and how they give you reimbursement. If people understood that, they would have felt better. But it maybe isn't our charge to educate, but I've been on that education wagon for 2.5 years on this. And I still think whether it's this group or we urge the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education to educate people. Give them a document that shows what we discussed, how things work, have a public hearing.
Yeah.
People need to understand that this time we crossed every T, dotted every I, and went line by line by line.
And when we do that meeting,
Yeah.
bond counsel, if it's okay to do
Needs
this,
to be there.
needs to be there because
Mhm.
those are the people, not our finance director. That's the person that needs to answer the magic number question. Can we afford this? Somebody raises their hand and says, how much would it be if we did it in 25 years? How much will we do it in 30? This person, they are, how much is it in 20 years? Or we could try and do it for 30, but we can turn around and refinance
Mhm.
this as we're moving along, and most people don't, and maybe drop the number back down. And I think that I'm gonna say this, the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen needs to get behind that We go there with our plan and say, this is what we agreed upon. This is what we feel needs to be done. You can turn around and say absolutely not, but before you say no, we need to hear from the money person. What is it gonna, is this gonna cripple this town? Is this gonna, are we gonna be okay? Or, you know, Bob's saying about, you know, taking the money that we're of savings and putting it in there, taking a chunk of it off, and we can reduce that down.
I don't think we'll ever pass a
Right.
referendum without putting some money towards it. I think that was the initial charge
Yeah,
way back, that we were gonna, when the bond fell off, we were gonna use that money, which, and I commend you for leaving it in capital, because that's where it can't be used. It'd be moved right out different. So the first year to put it in capital was smart, because it will remain there unless
Yeah.
something changes.
You had the.
And you build on
selectmen
it.
is- I think the selectmen is the same on that issue.
They are. They have absolutely.
and it's the right thing to do. Bob, thank you for bringing it up.
It is, we have to
Yeah.
get that
Yeah.
number, number, we have to get that approach, and that have to be how it's sold, depending on whatever our savings, we know what our savings are gonna be, very close to those savings, and then, you do an amortization schedule. Anytime on the computer, it's gonna tell you at a certain percentage what you're gonna pay over 30 years, 28 years, and a municipal note or commercial note is what it will be. And to be perfectly honest with you, it's like 1.6 million a year, or 28 million. Well, our savings were pretty close to that number initially, so if we needed to borrow half of that or $8 million, I think the taxpayers are gonna say, well, then this is worth it. But I'll tell you this, the number that I have, the lowest number I have, I could be way off. I looked at every scenario. The lowest number I have to renovate to new and a capital improvements to another, I'm not saying any which way the school is about with, and this is important, with the 3 million going into whatever school stays for town usage, if it does stay that way, either Valley View, Gildersleeve, or Brownstone. And at least 8 million for this here, you're at $42 million
And how much?
after reimbursement on the renovate to new, whatever it is, cheapest one.
Okay, so, and that's, and these are the things, obviously, once we get to square footage with Fryer to figure out what buildings will
Right.
fit. Thank you, that's
Those
gonna
could
be,
go up a little bit or come down a little.
right, and well, in my opinion, the only, but you gotta remember everybody thinks I'm the guy trying to drive all the numbers down. I wanna make sure we get a good product no matter, but the only way I see you potentially being able to lower that would be, and I'm not saying this is where I'm leaning, would be get rid of renovate to new and go to renovate on just that school also and add that in, and that would lower it, but then it's a different
So
problem.
you're at
and I'm not-
44, and I gotta add the 8 and the 3. But if you're right, if you do a capital improvement on one of the schools.
It would take you from the 20 to whatever you're.
You could get
it would
almost-
take you $10 million.
You're almost at that number, but
Yeah.
you're addressing here and whatever school you leave for future uses. That's the benefit you get.
So
So pick a capital, renovate to new and a capital improvement, whichever way you do that, you saw the 44, the $45 million numbers to renovate to new, which whenever you have 2 schools, right? You're gonna save.
But
I
hang
just
on,
don't know. You're not gonna get the renovate to new. We're gonna miss and lose some things, but.
add the high school number to that. So just so we're all on the same
That's
page,
the-
always add the high school. So the 44 would be.
Plus 8.
Plus 8. Yeah, so you'd be, and that's fine, and that's how I'd want to do the math. And we know what that number is. So the only scenario, so a renovate to new school, we all know is 20 million bucks. Whatever school we're gonna renovate, it's gonna need at least 10. So the most you're gonna lower this to, the most you can lower it to is 32, just so we all know what the bottom number, give or take, using that would be it. That would be.
32, if we get to it.
The secondaries.
Give or take, no, 2 schools and up here.
No, I know.
Oh,
I understand. We're factoring in the 8 million at high school.
So-
We're factoring in 3 million to a decommissioned building.
but then for better, potentially a better product. It would be 42 or 43, we're not gonna hold everybody's numbers, so, and having one building renovate to new, so those are good numbers to listen. It started up, back to Fryer, we need to make sure, I know he was using the 30,000 elevation, well, now I need him to dial it down to, drone. We gotta make sure, and I respect that you respect his numbers, but I trust but verify. I just wanna see and walk you through it.
One side thing, thanks.
Please, no, I think we're in good dialogue.
You're absolutely right, that Mike will even say, these numbers that you have here, the 43, the 43, 1, the 44, 8, all these is like a program on a spreadsheet that takes numbers of students times state reimbursement rate times general construction rate equals, right? These don't consider soft costs and actual costs and all that. Part of what this committee, the next step will be, once this committee comes to a decision, like come to we want the real numbers on I'm gonna make some, say this committee says, from sixth grade to the middle school, decommission value, turn Gildersleeve into a pre-K 2 school, turn Brownstone into a 3-5 school. Mike, Charles, go bring me the real numbers on that, right? What Mike will do then is he'll say, okay, I need some time. He'll go get together with his buddies at Downs Construction. He'll sit down and take this, what I just described there is 43 on scenario 2, and come back to us with a document called a conceptual order of magnitude budget. I think I gave you one. Those then are getting from, this is the 50,000 foot view. You're getting down to about 25,000 feet.
He was at 30, don't get me.
Right, 30 down to 15,000, and that's where.
And that's what goes to the town.
And explain the process he used for that, because I watched him do it with the pre-K 5 school.
Yeah.
He gives all of this to Downs, they go off with their Downs team. He gives it to his team, they go off with their team. They work separately, they get together and they argue. And then out of that argument comes that conceptual order of magnitude budget, which Mike will tell you isn't how much you're going to spend. It's got the one for the mega school had $15 million in soft costs, right? I mean, you saw it, huge guesses, but at least once you have that conceptual order of magnitude budget, that's the one you can take to the bank. By the bank, I mean the financial planners. That's the one that goes to the financial planners and bond counsel. That's the one that, you better make sure you have an architecture firm, a construction firm, bond counsel, and your bankers going, yep, we're good with that. That's the one that if the Board of Selectmen says that's the number we're running with, goes to voters. But in the voters vote on that. Let's say the voters approve that. That's still not the number. You need then a building committee who puts out RFQs and RFPs and everybody starts bidding. It's only then after that whole process that you went from 30 to 15 to how much. And then you guys know this better. Even that how much, when the guys show up with the jackhammers, that how much is going to change day to day as they start ripping walls apart and saying, ooh, we underbid or overbid it. I'll tell you, Mike called me the other day, and I'm in your lane. Mike came to me the other day, he's like, man, you guys blew it. And I said, why do we blow it? He goes, Portland, if you had voted for that, there's only 3 districts in this state that are on the priority list and getting work done. The companies out there are hungry for work. If you had put out bids in this environment, you would have been getting some sweetheart deals. And he said that to me to rid me a little bit, but I was like, that's true. And of course, other things that are going to change are, we don't know what our new state reimbursement rate is going to be. We don't know what tariffs are going to be. We don't know how much steel is going to cost. We don't know who's going to bid, but that's the process. So the process is this committee comes up with a recommendation. I take that recommendation and I run with Fryer. Fryer goes and works with Downs and Fryer. They come back with the conceptual order of magnitude. That then goes to bond counsel, the bankers, and the Board of Selectmen. That then gets out to the voters. That then gets to a building committee. Then you have to follow the accounting processes and hire an architect and a construction company and an engineering firm. And
Is that going to be the same problem? Or is there a different process for if we just renovate or those projects?
so my feeling is that.
Because I think we know we're doing that somewhere.
Here's what I think. I think that what I've heard from us and from Mike is that if we just went down the road of capital improvements, which I think you're talking, just renovations, not renovating, just renovations. The amount and the expense of the work is going to need an OPM, a general contractor, an architect to guide us. We are so far beyond a place where Carl, Bob, and I can work with Tom and put out a bid and figure it out. the buildings are in such a state of disrepair. We really need a professional like
Absolutely.
Fire or Slam or somebody to come in and say, this was the recommendation. I think the way I said, this is the recommendation of our steering committee. We just make a recommendation based on these funny numbers, which are at the 30,000 foot view. If the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education hears those numbers and reads our report and says, yep, that's the way we want to go, Charles, keep going. We're gonna need an OPM or somebody to come in and do this. And that's when they do the conceptual order of magnitude budget. And that's when, I think it's only then that we get from 30,000 foot view, looking at 5-year-old report and trying to guess, to a place where bond council will run with those numbers and a financial planner can make them work. And only then we'll even be at a place where we can answer the question of the voters, how will it affect our mill rate?
So does Fryer have a recommendation who that would be? Because he mentioned that it wouldn't be, he's not renovate to nice guy. He's the renovate to new. Who would he recommend? Because at some point, we are going to have some renovation projects. And I do agree with you on your, Carl and Bob.
Here's where,
They add just so much to the table.
let me answer that question this way.
What'd you say, Bob?
I don't think we'll be able to choose them. It's a good bid based on.
Yeah, we're gonna have to go to bid for that.
Oh,
That's
And here's what
difficult, you know that.
Good point.
Right, and part of the reason I think at this point, I love Mike. He's done an amazing job for us. He's also spent a lot of time, he extended our contract with us. I think we need to use Mike to get us through to the point where this committee is comfortable making a recommendation. And my recommendation is, which school do you want to decommission? Which school do you want to turn into a pre-K2? Which school do you want to turn into a 3-5? Mike can get us the big picture numbers on that. At that point, we are either going to have to pay him more and extend his contract, or go out and maybe find another company, right? Mike's worked with us for a long time. When I get sick, sometimes I look for a second opinion. I want to give Fryer a really nice letter of recommendation, tell them they're amazing, but maybe it's time to go back out to bid and see if another firm or somebody could
I
come
think
in
we're gonna have to go back.
and help us with that. Because again, Mike's done a lot with us, but
We're gonna have to.
Oh, yeah. He got us
Because
to
even
the
if we
point-
separate this project out,
No, he might have
$8
an
million
opportunity.
worth of work.
He'll have a good
over-
opportunity.
It's all gonna be.
Done a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry, the
Yeah.
secondary school,
You got it.
yes, and then the other will be,
And
it probably, Friars is obviously. I think it's gonna go absolutely all starting over and going through it.
I am adding to the list because I think maybe you asked a question that's a good question, then we kind of got a little bit
Yeah.
in circles, but I think the question really is, what is the process? Can we clarify the process for Portland and also, in terms of state reimbursement on capital renovations, we're gonna go on to bond to renovate 8 million for the high school or whatever, and potentially renovations on a different school that may not be a renovate to new project. Can Fryer talk us through what that looks like timeline wise? And,
Yeah.
is there,
That's the.
are there certain projects that we have to go on the same timeline as renovate new? In terms of seeking reimbursement from the state, or is there a different process timeline wise? Yeah, that was your question, right? And it's a good question, and I feel like I don't have clarity on that, and I would like to get that
The shared
clarity.
document I just gave to Charles Laura, it explains step by step, and boy, I'll tell you what, out of the 21 pages, I was amazed at the things we have to do to even get looked at on the application. And a lot of that is the engineering, it's the architects you have to have, then the state wants to meet with them.
This is for any kind of reimbursement or for a,
TAS, right, under school district.
Right.
part of what was in.
I was surprised.
Yeah, part of this too is, and this was the thing, that if things had gone a different way in November, we would have heard in December if our grant was approved by the state.
Yeah.
Even after they approve it, they would have been meeting with me and Fryer and the state would have, I said, it's not like that's what we're doing. It would have been a negotiation with the state. They might have given us more. They might have looked at the plan and said, yeah, we don't like it. We'll give you 70% if you rip that school down and start fresh, right? This is what's happened in other towns that Mike's worked in. applied for renovate to new status, and they said that building's so far gone, we want it ripped out of there and start over. Because the way the state looks at it is, when they give you money, they don't want to hear from you for another 20 years.
Exactly.
And they're gonna look at the project and go, yeah, if you do it the way you've dreamed it up, we'll be hearing from you in 15. If you do it this way, which might cost a little more, we won't have to hear from you again in 20. So we'll give you more money to do it that, but that, we never got there. Like and that would have all been part of a discussion with the building committee and architect and. That's what,
That's good. That's no, I mean,
we're so far down the road.
the bottom line is that, you know, there's so many reasons we didn't, it didn't encompass the right numbers. It was 30 years. We could sit here all night. We're past, we need to just figure out now how to get to our numbers, our square footage and the best path. And I do believe there's only 3 paths left. It's gonna be renovate two buildings, renovate to new. And renovate up here.
Yeah,
That's path 1. Path 2 will be a hybrid, like I think Carl suggested it. Rent 1 to new, maybe renovate another, just renovate another capital, we'll start calling it capital. Conversation is that's how, and then capital up here, that's scenario 2 or scenario 3. There's only 3 scenarios left, all capital across the board, and we stop arguing about renovate to new and blah, blah, blah. Those are the only 3 scenarios, and I'm not pushing any, I'm just saying that's reality. Let's get some square footage from Friar. Let's figure out where we're going.
Can
how to
I
get
ask
there.
the committee into a
As
question?
long as you don't bring up the thing that fails, because I can't.
Here are the scenarios. Right, take a look now. Here are the scenarios.
No, we don't know if those are accurate, so.
Well, don't look at the numbers.
Okay.
Just look at the scenarios. The way I see the scenarios, they are either turn Valley View into a pre-K 2 school, whatever that means, and Gildersleeve into a 3-5. Turn Gildersleeve into a pre-K 2 and Brownstone into a 3-5. Or turn Valley View into a pre-K 2 and Brownstone into a 3-5. Don't look at the numbers, costs or anything. Those are the only 3 options if you're going to decommission a school. Are you all ready to take a position on which of those 3 scenarios at this point you prefer?
You can't, because what if you make the wrong one based on, you don't have all the information?
And
Why would you ever do that?
And more information is the square footage.
Not necessarily. You have to know all aspects. I'll give you an example. Pick any one of these. And if they're both every single scenario is renovate to new both buildings, it's $80 to $88 million. Okay? That's probably not gonna fly, and that doesn't include the high school. So for round numbers, let's call it 100 million for that. That is not going to work. Can we all agree on that? So let's work backwards. So at the end of the day, it may come down to, they may be 1 renovate to new, renovate. They may be, it's not going to be, I don't believe it's going to be 2 renovate to new. So I wouldn't want to preclude any building when we may find out we need it. For example, if we were to close Valley View and we found out it was what we needed, or vice versa, if we were to close Brownstone and find out Valley View could never physically work, we've now shot ourselves in the foot and added 7 million to the taxpayers. Well, that's not good either. So how about let's just get all the information from Friar, make it, we can work towards it. We should never make a decision without all the information.
I guess I'm just confused about it. Yeah. I'd love to know specifically what more information is needed, because at some point before this committee can be done, you're gonna have to pick not a numbers, but these are the scenarios. Unless the committee's even now after this point reconsider and say it's all too complicated, we should keep all 3 elementary schools. If you're still at decommission an elementary school, these are the only scenarios. What else could there be? I mean, there's only 3 paths now through the woods, right?
I think the committee's in agreement. Per se, that two elementary schools is the way to go. The question is, what 2 elementary?
Right.
What, and I don't think what I'm hearing here tonight is the committee's ready to make, correct me if I'm wrong, ready to make that choice without hearing from Friars. Am I?
Well, I'll give you one. Yeah, you're spot on, Carl. I'll give you one of the examples. If you renovate the wrong building to new, I would vote against it. Based on that, if it's a renovate and it makes sense, I'm in. I'm not even saying which building. You could easily take this scenario and you could flip my vote by renovating the wrong building to new. I think you have to make a proper decision based on that building. And I already gave an example, Brownstone, where I'm not leaning towards renovate to new there. So if somebody said, we're keeping Brownstone, but I want to renovate to new, I'm gonna have, you follow me? I need to see the numbers. I think we fast forward, but we gotta give it prior and we have to figure it out.
And no pressure,
Right.
but this can't fail again.
Thank you.
We owe it to our kids, we owe it to our teachers, we owe it to the town to make sure that this passes. And if we need another night or two to feel comfortable, get that information to make the right choice, I think we have to do it.
And I think it's great that there are people up here that voted against the mega school and voted for it. I think we have a good group up here. I think we're bringing different perspectives. And at the end of the day, we're going to have to come to something that we can all sell because our schools need repairs. So we have to get there as a group. I think we're gonna. I really do. I want to. So thank you.
So we're looking at the most for the less, right? It's all about the numbers. So it's the cheapest price, right?
No, because if renovate
Not
to
the
new.
cheapest number.
No,
It's the cheap.
no, because one school renovate to new, you might be able to convince me that there's a better bang for the buck.
That's life. When you go look for a car.
Yeah.
You're
I do-
gonna look
I do
at
this.
the model you want, and you're gonna go to 7 different dealers to
You don't
find the
think so?
best price.
Wow. Why do you think a 42 with a renovate one building to new might fail? I don't think it would fail. I think if we address all the issues, I don't believe that would be.
No, I think that if we put if it's sold with, we can cut that in half with savings, which is important.
No, that is the final number, the 42.
When you
No,
say
we
with
can-
savings, you mean applying
Apply
money
savings.
that brings the budget towards.
Thank you, sorry.
That would help. 35%.
Sorry, yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and then
that-
you have to, I don't think anything's gonna pass unless, like I said, we put,
This we're all
we
clear.
have to put a number
Yeah.
here. And we have to put a number wherever we leave.
Yeah, and I'll put my.
And the residents of Portland have to clearly understand
Why?
what this committee went through, and to your point, has to clearly understand. Because if we need more people to come down to the board of selectmen meeting and say, you have to do this. Then if they understand and you express to them why it has to happen that way, then let them be the folks that come in and say, yes, I agree. We need to budget some additional funding now.
And I want to put one more thing on the record, Bob, because you just triggered my brain. If, for example, I'll use Gildersleeve, if we were to renovate that to new, I think we're doing an injustice just based on square footage to the teachers. If we then bumped up the renovation number and we have to keep the square footage because we can, I would like to see that scenario. It might be better. It might be a wash, but we end up with a bigger, better, the teachers are happy. We start going down to the tiniest, there's gonna be.
We had some big discussions on that, myself on, what is the best building to renovate to new to get the biggest bang for the buck? In my eyes, it wasn't good. I thought we can do project improvements in phases there that would make the changes that we need. And I weighed that with Brownstone as well as Valley View. So if you were to ask me, and I don't think I'd change my opinion, that Gildersleeve would remain in my eyes as a capital improvement building. If it stayed.
And the others capital improvement too, like
No, there would be a renovation. to do.
number 12.
Well, my numbers, the cheapest for the town, as far as I'm concerned, is Valley View, just because we're the future expansion on that. But with that said, I would not do that without putting money into brownstones. It's how we can use it.
No, I agree with that. I think whatever we.
Because if we didn't do that, then I would say no on it, because it would pass.
No,
So let me
It
just
would-
clarify. So
that's
you're
just-
suggesting where you're at is renovate to new Valley, create pre-K to capital improvements, Gildersleeve, some money into Brownstone
Absolutely.
for electrical service to serve whatever it becomes in the future.
Yeah, to serve the town to be able to use it and measure their ability to, not say make profit, but to break even.
is it safe to say you may change your opinion if Valley View then needed another 7 million or 7,000
Absolutely.
square feet or what?
Without a doubt.
Right, because that, to me, that changes, it. And then
So that, if you get that zeroed in, then, yeah, that would change, that would change it, yeah.
Could you support that?
That's me.
Here's the problem I see with that scenario, then we're maxed out, and this is why I want to know the ed spec inside and out, and I want to know what our district needs in the short term and long term. If you're telling me up here where I think we're safe from sixth grade up, even moving sixth grade up here, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we still have extra space classroom wise, I believe, and these are the things I want to know.
Yeah.
But below, we're going to
Just
be.
the right amount of classrooms.
That's it.
Who puts the
Be
grade
good
up
here.
here?
Look, it's
Thought we-
it will require teachers to do some things differently than they're doing now. And some more shared spaces, but we have more than enough for the sixth grade.
And correct me if I'm wrong, we still potentially would have spare classrooms up here for.
Correct.
Okay, that's all I want to hear. And that's what I need to know, making these decisions.
Let me answer that this way too.
Go.
Definitely on the high school side.
Yes.
Okay,
I got.
We'll fill that.
We will fill the middle school.
Right.
The high school side will still be as it is now, campus.
maybe we have to flip the two.
It's only if
Whatever, yeah, you know, because people fall off in high school, maybe we gotta flip the two, but whatever. There's the square footage excessive here, and my point is, and I know we all want to get out here, but my point is, I want to make sure in the lower grades that we have an extra 4 to 6 classrooms. And I understand they don't necessarily stay extra, because we all know teachers will fill that space.
How many bottles of champagne yet?
No,
But it sounded to me like if you could be convinced that Valley View would meet the space requirements for what our kids need to become a pre-K two school, that's rather amazing new. And Gildersleeve on a capital basis could be great updated to serve our 3-5. You could be convinced that that plan will work.
I have to see it, but I don't think you ever get around the real auditorium. I don't think you get around the multiple.
You so hung up on this auditorium.
Because I think about it, Carl, every time now they have anything, we're gonna be putting chairs in a gym for all the grades now.
This is very common.
This is fine, but 50 years, it doesn't need to be. My point is, we have a beautiful auditorium. If that building was to say, we have the spare classrooms. We have it's one of the most energy efficient buildings we own. It has the solar. It's going to be the more expensive of the two. Turn it over to the town. That's another big factor in my head. The only reason I think Valley View in 25 or 30 years will become a very big school. And I'm okay with it. And the only way you can do it is if it was the other two in the interim.
You think, sorry, back up. You think Valley View will be a big school in 15 years? Why? In 25 years?
Because if we grow as a town, we are going to eventually probably put a bigger school up there and the residents will be okay with it. And we'll have the money to what to do with Gildersleeve Brownstone at that point. And then everything would migrate up there. But in the interim, you still have the other ones. And up here, you're down to 40,000 give or take square feet. That's the easiest one to turn into park and rec, food pantry, PD in the interim, whatever. It's tiny.
And when you say that you need to see it, are you talking about like floor plans or like, what does that mean to you?
No. See, it means we have to go through the ed spec.
Okay.
Everything has its footage, including hallways, boiler room, janitor closet, gymnasium, cafeteria. Everything has a square footage in the ed spec.
So you want Mike and Bryce to just.
We gotta walk through that number. And if that number comes out to X, because if the number comes out heavier, go.
Only thing I want to say about the ed spec you're looking at was a pre-K 5 ed spec. I don't know the answer to this, and I can check with Mike, but I imagine pre-K 2 kids are little, or they're smaller.
They have bigger classrooms.
Right, but they, I don't know.
In the ed spec, they do.
We wrote that ed spec assuming there would be.
They match the state. Dr. Britton, it matches what the state requires now for our reimbursement. I went back on the state website and checked in order to get reimbursement, you can't build bigger than X. Your numbers other than 2 match the state of Connecticut's requirements to the T.
Here's what I was planning to offer though.
Yes.
I will write another ed spec. I'm really good at it now. I am prepared, if this committee directs me, Charles, we want to see an ed spec, we want to see a blocking diagram, we want to see space usage, we want to see a 3D picture, we want to see what a pre-K 2 school would look like. I'm a busy man, but I'll make it work. I will go right in that spec plan for this committee in collaboration with Fryer, that Fryer can use to put all of those things together the same way they did for the mega school. And if the committee, and then that's what they would use for this conceptual order of magnitude budget. My suggestion would be take the pre-K 5-1, and the state standards are good. You can guess they're going to be the same, but I really would need to work with my team to envision what we would want for a pre-K 2 school, which might be different than what we wanted for a pre-K 5 school.
That's where you lose me. Give me a scenario where it would change, because I,
Standardized programs would definitely
Right.
be different.
and those are very small square footage.
We
Yep.
wouldn't, we would only need the ABA lab. So we
Correct.
wouldn't
That's
need
all I
a
could
big
do.
program.
Right.
Very excited.
Which would go together, say,
Bridge and Rise are on.
Bridge and Rise could be at Gildersleeve. I have to sit down with my special services.
They're gonna be two buildings, right?
Right, but
But they're going to either be
Yeah,
in
correct,
Valley View
yeah.
scenario or Gildersleeve.
Right,
You know,
Ridge. Would be, it would be a Gildersleeve.
Yeah. So that's where, and then I need to see the square footage at the next building. You follow me? We have to approve. So when you do your ed spec, it's gotta work for everything up to phase.
here's what
We both.
here's what I'm offering is
Yep.
if you guys take the pre-K 5-1 and just let's understand that we're done with the one big school model. I left that on the website, anybody can look at it. I'm prepared to take it down, let it become digital dust at this point, or put it in the recycle bin. Let's start fresh and let me write a new ed specs plan for pre-K 2 Valley. I've written lots of them at this point. It'll take me time, but if this committee were to say, Charles, we want to know what a renovated to new Valley View would look like to create a pre-K 2 school, that would definitely need that spec plan. I will do that. So
Here's a scenario. I don't care what building it is. I would like a pre-K to 2 because it could easily be Gildersleeve. So you can do your ed spec with the square footage. That'd be wonderful. Shows me all the programs and everything in whatever building. The buildings are relevant. These are just numbers. I just need to see what you come up with for square footage. What programs? And that helps us as a group make a decision. We don't want to make the wrong decision.
So, but if you're gonna, I'll throw it to Bob's, where Bob's head is. If this committee is with Bob in saying that I envision a recommendation coming out of this committee to do some work, but otherwise decommission Elmstone as a school, create a pre-K 2 renovated Valley View and capital improvements on Brownstone. The renovated Valley View would definitely need a pre-K 2 ed specs plan because it's quantitatively different than it is now based on the number of kids you're adding to it. The capital improvements for Gildersleeve would not need an ed specs plan. That would need an OPM, a general contractor, to help us figure out a plan for the roof and the walls and other things without doing it to run it too. So you would need an ed specs plan for Valley View, but you wouldn't need one for Gildersleeve. And but if you were to turn Gildersleeve into a pre-K 2, I don't know if you would need an ed specs plan because you're quantitatively not changing the number of kids, but qualitatively you would need to look at bathrooms and classrooms and other things to consider. Does that make sense?
Yeah, all right, so here's what I need in order to vote. And I said this in the last meeting and I asked you if you were gonna, now it sounds like you could do some sort of aspect. I would like you to not make, and it can be just, I have your aspect here. It's not a very complicated document.
Yep.
I don't believe it'll take you very long. I think we're gonna do a lot of, what's it called? Copy and pasting. We're gonna be moving around, because I don't believe you're changing in VDR. Square foot classrooms.
Specialized programs are definitely going to.
Yeah, I do like specialized programs. Can you give me and this committee what we need for square footage? Because I think it's very important we get this right. What we need for a I believe we're going down to 2 elementary schools at some point. We're going to need to know what a pre-K to 2, whatever building needs for square footage. So you can walk, just give me these categories like you have here. And then you're still gonna have a principal in each building, a nurse in each building, in each building, a cafeteria. They're all spelled out what it needs to be. And I need the next building to be 3, 4, 5. Building is irrelevant. That way we can get it right, no matter what we do, Dr. Bird, even if it's just renovate, period. We know whether we can do it or not, whether it's renovate to new on one of the buildings, or then we can make, I believe, I can't make a decision without knowing that it's gonna work. So if you can just look at the ed spec now, figure out, other than the specialized programs, shift a few
Let me
things.
do this.
Yep.
I'm happy to do that, and I'm gonna do it even if you answer no to this question. Ben, I'm gonna put you on the spot. Perfect. If I come back to you with an ed specs plan for a pre-K 2 Valley View that Friars looked at and is like, yeah, I can nail those.
Why do you, let me ask you, why do you keep putting what school on? Why is that?
Yeah, and just,
Why is that so important to you? It's not.
well, let's say, fine, a pre-K 2 school, just bear with me.
It's gonna happen.
And a capital improvement plan for
One,
Gildersleeve.
it could be opposite.
Right. Could you get behind that, knowing that Brownstone would be decommissioned as a Portland Public School?
I'm not there yet because I think
But
what
you
you're,
could.
I'm not there yet because I think what you are gonna show me in your ed spec is you barely squeak by. And what that does is it puts the town of Portland in a bad predicament, and not only long term, it puts us in a bad predicament in the short term if we have any growth. We're gonna learn real quick.
We also have it, Ben, from Peter Protter or whatever his name is, that has identified. We paid a lot of money, I'm sure, for it. Where we are with this.
Hmm.
Unless you know that there's something out there that's not in that report. That we need to know about.
You're saying as far as the projections?
Yes.
So one of the things that they didn't study is, number one, I don't know if you've seen this, a lot of the Portland houses that are sold go to Portland residents. We're one of the highest rating for Portland people to buy Portland.
So Portland residents say.
Yes, and they do, and they shift. It's kind of comical when you talk to assessor, higher than most towns of the state of Connecticut. What I don't believe they've quantified is a lot of people will move into the new Brainerd Place. I think you're gonna see some houses free up. Because the numbers do work for you to sell your house and live in Brainerd. I think it's gonna be an excellent product down there, and he's starting to lease them. And I think you'll see more houses go for sale with veterans. Then what'll happen is Dr. Britton discussed the number of children coming out of Brainerd Place, which I think is part of it. And you brought up a good point, but I think the more important thing nobody has discussed is when these people sell their house and retire and they put that money in a CD or whatever they do with it. And now they go live off the interest in renting, and they don't have to mow the lawn and all that stuff, and their car's parked in a nice parking garage underneath. You're gonna see that those homes that went up for sale are gonna be bought and families are gonna move in. And I think that number may shock us in the future. I believe we're gonna get some growth of children, and I hope what we have in that report. That's my personal, because I haven't seen anybody quantify that for me. So, and I don't believe they can. So we're an anomaly. Portland's a unique bedroom town, which is a great.
I think other towns get into that same boat.
Maybe.
I think it's a fair thing to say moving forward, that no matter where you live, that chance comes up.
Can I, so one of the communities we went and visited was South Windsor. I should have Kate Carter, the superintendent, come and talk to you about South Windsor, who went through this. And in the middle of building their schools, had an affinity grouping of Southeast Asians moving, which almost doubled the student population. And they had to literally, in the middle of their thing, create more space in their schools.
For the last school, and it was for 700 additional kids.
That's right.
Unexpected.
You're saying it's impossible.
It's not impossible, but you asked Peter Crowder about that
Yes, I did.
specifically, and do you remember what he said? He was like, it's not gonna happen in Portland.
Yes.
And that's where I disagree, because Portland is a unique bedroom town where we now, for the first time ever, we have more than 8 apartments in one building. It will free up a lot of Portland homes. People will move into the
Whether you
building.
disagree or not, you're not the professional in this, and we have to rely on what the professionals say.
If we just keep poking off of that, we're never gonna do it.
100%, we can't do that.
Never gonna do it.
Using that logic, you're saying professionals are never wrong.
I'm not saying professionals are wrong, but I'm not gonna go to Dr. Google if I'm having a heart attack. I'm gonna go to the emergency room, get checked out by someone.
Opinions are usually.
That's what I'm gonna say.
And the other things I would just mention that the facility study committee talked about that too. As a matter of fact, one of the priorities you'll see in there is it's what I think it's the last one, right? Make sure you have enough space to grow.
37.
third, number, what was it, second line?
Second from the-
Second last, right? Make sure you have to grow.
Yes.
Specifically because of potential pre-K,
Yeah.
but also for.
Yes.
And that's part of the reason why, to me, Valley View makes the most sense, because that's really your only building with elbow room. I mean, that's the only property, not the building, the only building with elbow room.
Right, you're saying that the only building with elbow
The
room would be
campus.
Downstone.
The only
The
campus.
only campus with elbow room would be Valley View, but the only building with elbow room. So once you take this $40 million note and we outgrow it potentially, which you said we should be prepared for, you're not going to be adding on to Valley View. We're going to be broke. We're going to be back into the not funding capital all over again. And you're going to want the free square footage that we kept in order to survive. I'm just giving you this. So if you make those two aspects, it'll help all of us see the light, what we have for square footage. And I appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to do it.
Thank you.
I don't know if I can have it by next Thursday, but.
How about, do you guys think we should, couple things here, okay? Not gonna be here, but what are your thoughts on this? Skip next Thursday.
I'm not gonna be here, but that certainly does not matter.
You,
You're not-
next Thursday also, you would not have either of you next Thursday.
I think that wherever Mike needs to be at the next meeting, one
So,
hundred percent.
That, my point is this, it gives Mike a couple weeks to. You know, which I don't think he's gonna have a week long, to be honest with you, but.
Rush now.
It gives him some time to do that, gives you some time to do what you have to do, Charles. You tell me if you agree, disagree, I'm trying to.
That
I
makes
think
sense.
we're just finding out that the two of you can't be here next week.
And then Carl and I both can't be here on the 15th. So just throwing that out there. And then the following Thursday is high school awards night. So
And don't forget, we shifted.
it's,
If
we
it-
got, that's.
Change day.
If it helps, we can switch the day of the week.
That's what I'm saying.
Because I believe it's important to have every voice here. Again, we all are trying to get to the finish line. We're not trying to prolong this. We're trying to come up with a good outcome. But I do agree with what Jen said. I think we need Fryer at the next one, otherwise we get nowhere.
Yeah, I agree. Give us
So-
a couple of weeks, I can almost look at specs plan and work with Mike
But I
and
also
say
think-
how much. it would
Okay,
cost.
so-
We need to start getting this up before summer, because once summer hits, I just think our
Yeah.
schedules are gonna be too
Yeah,
volatile
right.
to.
I would like to see this thing buttoned up.
I would too. I'm not gonna rush it, but I would too.
Before
So,
graduation.
having said that, could you
really
make
do.
sure,
When's graduation?
In the middle of June?
could, Dr. Bray, could you make sure he's also working on what is potentially reimbursable and everything up in there? Like, I know it's a big.
Look, I think if you gave us 3 weeks, what I could likely do is develop an ed specs plan with Mike and say, show me what this would look like.
Yep.
At Valley and at Gildersley.
Yep.
Cause that's, it sounds like you want an ed specs plan that's generic, but it's not really generic. It's not gonna be for 2 schools.
Yep.
Cause I don't think anybody's interested in seeing Brownstone be a pre-K 2 school. Okay, so I could probably say, Mike, here's an ed specs plan. If we were to make this happen at Valley View or Gildersleeve, what would it look like? He might look at that, I just gotta tell you, and go, well, you don't need the ed specs plan for Valley View. You have the space. You're not quantitatively changing the number of kids. The only thing you really would need there is just to add bathrooms to your costs. But certainly Valley View would need an ed specs plan because that's a new grade, 100 more kids that would
Yeah.
require that. So that's why I wasn't saying that what I'm not in, it's not that I'm avoiding a generic one. I'm just saying that you might not need it at Gildersleeve, but you definitely would need it at Valley View. That's why it makes most sense to me to develop the ed specs plan pre-K 2 for Valley View, give it to Mike and say, Mike, update that number that he already gave you and come with blocking diagrams and 3D images, visuals of what that would look like at Valley View for that 40 million on the taxpayer.
But-
Keep in mind, oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, you were saying you think 3 weeks is kind of a reasonable amount of time to do that work.
Yeah.
I know that's a lot, but if you think 3-ish weeks, that puts us the week of the 19th. That Thursday evening is high school awards night. So I guess I would just ask if there's another night that week that would work
Right, I can make myself available.
for this committee,
Which week is it?
the week of the 19th. Or the week 26th is the following.
The 19th, a lot going on, but I can do it.
All right.
And Dr. Britton, the other thing, to remember is if numbers end up being the driving factor at the end of this, maybe a renovation scenario. And that's why the aspect building generic is so important, because under the pretend Valley View just as a renovation, not a renovate to new, we need to know it's gonna physically work. And if it's not going to physically work, maybe that's the one on the chopping block. You follow me? That's why the inspect is kind of the driving force that I need to be able to see where our district's gonna go and make sure we have the service, but I'm talking.
So for the 19, Tuesday night's Board of Ed, right?
And Wednesday night is like,
Right.
yeah, so now.
So you got.
Following week,
And then Thursday night, you got that.
it's high school or.
That's the 26th is Memorial Day. The 27th, 28th, 29th, I don't see anything on it. We actually already have strategic planning committee.
On the
On the
29th.
29th. You want just, can you all
I
come
can't
back?
make the 29th. I make 18,
Better find a
15,
way.
22nd. The 29th.
Are you gonna be in the country?
Not the next day, but then I have a wedding.
So we do
Uh,
27th to the 28th, a different day.
I like the 28th, so I can at least have one day.
28th
for
works.
Memorial Day weekend and get everything on this.
That's Wednesday
The
night.
20th.
No board select meeting that night, I
Do
think.
the 28th, but that's fine.
And this is the meeting with Fryer, correct?
As long as he can do it. So all this has gotta kind
Yeah,
of.
that's,
Well, why don't we do this? I know you can't be here the 29th. You can't be here the 28th. Can I at least say, let me talk to Mike and see
Right.
if he's available the 28th or the 29th. Whichever night works for him, at least we would have a majority of us. If he says I'm available the 29th, so Chris, it's you, but if he's available the 28th, it's Jen that might not be able
Do you
to
want to just have the 27th in there also? I know it's Tuesday right after Memorial Day weekend, but ask,
ask Mike.
okay.
So there's placeholder on your calendar.
I just want this right. And make sure we're good.
No,
Got it right.
And then we need to. We do.
Yes.
Well, I think we'll be able to move when we get
I
those
think
things
so too.
tightened up.
Well, it's
It's
good.
time to move.
And
Yeah.
if you give me those 3 weeks, I will come to you with a generic one. But I'll ask Mike to hey, take a look at this generic one, but also cater it to Valley View. And let's take a look
Pretty good
at it.
questions about square footage, so let's make sure that
If
it would work.
Because pretend we are just a renovate scenario, it's gotta work. I don't want the decision. I don't know.
I'm in.
I don't know. if taxpayers, at the end of the day, I think we don't want it to pass. So if,
Yeah, and look, sometimes in the end, it's nice. You know, you can write, we want gold plated faucets, right? I mean.
I want like just square footage. I didn't go by anything other than your square footage required per line. That's all I cared about.
Yeah.
I didn't.
Did you like the Valley View namesake?
Yours.
Hold that up in there.
Didn't you put the second floor with Gildersleeve or something? That's a namesake, yeah.
With the band shell in the back, did you like that?
Yeah.
I thought those were the only part I could be creative in.
Jeff, I have a quick question. We make a recommendation, we bring it to the Board of Selectmen. Are they going to take it or are they going to reject it and say we can only afford capital? That's it. The last time the board, the committee made a recommendation and it got thrown out.
Somewhat interested in capital last time. I think there was a fairly large number of the board that was agreeable, but then the budget just sliced it. But that's, that's part of the reason I think, and I know our time is getting limited, but maybe after, with that next meeting, we need to try to set a date shortly after that to try to get Board of Ed and Board of Selectmen together with us.
Right, but we need to, before we do that,
Have,
have a plan in place on school A, school B.
right.
Renovate is new, capital, whatever we can renovate.
Just want to back up a half step, because Chris, you asked a question, I think maybe there were crossed lines. You weren't asking about what happened with the capital improvement budget in this most recent budget cycle. You were asking about if we make a recommendation. Recommendation.
Yeah.
And if one of the recommendations is renovate to new one building and do heavy improvements on the other,
All I can say.
will
is-
the Board of Selectmen consider that?
Saw it. I mean, I think they're going, I'm looking from my right, the Board of Selectmen. There were an awful lot of folks there that were supporting that concept.
And the other thing I would add is maybe please try to be open-minded. Maybe we have one scenario that we are leaning towards as a group, and there may be a second scenario. I would like to see this pass because the Board of Selectmen,
I think the committee has to vote as a whole and come up with a plan, whether it's 4-3. Whatever the 7, 7 or 6-1, whatever. I mean, it is what it is. We're gonna come up with.
But we also have to be conscious of the reality that we may have.
We're never gonna make everybody happy, Ben.
No, I
Yes,
agree,
but we
but
are
we,
not.
no, but our charge
Oh.
is to identify the needs, the time frame, and talk about the
We're doing it.
And we have to make sure if there's a scenario that is a lot cheaper, the taxpayers deserve to know it too.
And if there's a compelling reason to go with one versus the other, that's, that's part of,
The other thing they
that's
have
part
to
of what what this conversation is, right?
No, because if it's a 3-4 split. Point is, the Board of Selectmen is then, they're gonna whatever we come up with, they're gonna hash out next, and they're gonna know what went on at this meeting regardless.
So be it.
Can I just add one part to that too? So here's sort of how I envisioned your last meeting as a committee. And it was the same process as the facilities study. At one meeting, I think maybe even that next night we meet, you're gonna have to vote. My hope is it's unanimous. I really, really think you should strive to get there. Unfortunately, I will tell you, I've been on several committees now and there haven't been one unanimous vote anywhere on any committee. And I don't anticipate there will be on this one, but I'm hopeful. You're gonna vote on that. I'm going to go away with Carl, he doesn't know this yet, and we're gonna go on a retreat and write a committee report.
So we take it.
Sit down outside this house by the pool, and we're gonna write a report for this committee, that in that report, I promise you, I'll lay it all out. Transparency will be key. Go read the facility study committee. I laid it all out, put it all out there. If you read that facility study committee report in detail, it says everything we talked about up into the reason for the 5-3 vote with one abstention. Right? And I will do that for you. But I think your last meeting is going to be, I hope it's a unanimous vote on the report. It won't be on the recommendations. You will have already voted on that. But I will give you a report, I promise, that is completely transparent, that lays out all of the options, including, Ben, to your point, option one would be, you know what the cheapest thing for Portland to do would be? What you've done for the past 22 years for the elementary schools. Nothing. The cheapest thing.
The cheapest thing would be renovate, not renovate to new. So that's not,
No, the cheapest thing would be do nothing on that.
no.
We know that's not an option.
That's not an
So-
option, though,
Yes,
right?
it's
Just don't throw in that.
That's.
Yeah. So he's fine. It is, I mean, you could potentially do nothing. It'd be an enormous mistake.
That's that.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I'm not necessarily fighting, because people could create an argument where a renovate to new scenario and a renovate. I could argue both sides of this. I think there's value. in both
And
sides.
Ben, you won't have to.
I'm not
there's
trying-
always in this report, like a Supreme Court decision, we can always have a dissenting opinion.
Yeah.
We will lay it out.
See him argue both sides though.
That comment out of Brent.
Okay.
Zinger, Chris.
Just so we're all on the same page here, we're gonna shoot for the 27th.
I'm gonna call Mike tomorrow,
Okay.
and I'm gonna let you know, it's either gonna be the Tuesday after Memorial Day, the Wednesday after Memorial Day, or the Thursday after the Memorial Day,
We are.
pending Mike's availability.
Would everyone potentially be available for the 27th? Just out of curiosity. We know that Jen's not available on the 28th and Chris is not available on the 29th. We don't know about Darcy because she's not here.
Is our second line? Oh, okay.
No, she told me, she texted me that she was having to go to the Wi-Fi was not great.
So the 27th would be our preferred date.
So it sounds like everyone's available 27th.
That's when we'll try to go.
Yes.
Okay. And maybe we can connect with Darcy just.
Twenty-six.
check
Never
on that.
done that over there. We have a barbecue. Gonna take, I'm gonna throw it. Report.
I'm swinging by. Call me.
So that's.
Only when Charles is.
Oh,
It's a very nice school.
do you have to go to orientation?
I mean, I live by it.
I came out of
It's not open until June 2nd.
Oh, there we go.
See, on the third auditorium, is it?
Deb won't mind if we
Seventh.
do it.
Seventh grade parent.
Joe, I'm good.
You might yell at me.
But
Check.
is that the 27th?
What's the 27th? I'm sorry.
Anything.
He doesn't have to. I have a coming seventh grade parent orientation in the auditorium on the 8th on September.
That's me then, and you, actually.
Look at that, an auditorium.
Later,
Did you mean gymatorium?
for seventh graders.
No, a very beautiful auditorium that is right over there. So like.
Yeah, I heard the other one looked like a museum, so I thought. it was
AC
beautiful.
too. Sure, that's that.
But let's get.
So we'll check.
So you guys go through all that. Do me a favor and set that meeting up. Well, I'll be back by then, but
Yeah. I like-
So it's
So-
Be the 28th or 29th?
or the 27th.
I thought you just ruled that out.
We have to find out if Mike Serrano's available for any of it.
Charles is.
Right, because without him, we're not getting it.
to be, how can you put in there to be determined?
Yes.
Right, we can do that.
Okay.
I'm gonna book that night.
Charles, if we have a meeting,
I got
if
enough
you
to
feel
do.
it's important to bring me by,
Fish.
I'll gladly sit in and listen, because it may get rid of half my questions here.
With Mike and you? Review the assessment.
Obviously start, get it down path, and maybe I look at it with you, and that might eliminate a good hour out of this committee.
There you go. Not bad.
Try to help everybody else here.
Let's
All
go.
right, so we're gonna be to be determined on the set the next meeting date.
Yep.
Fair?
Yep.
All those in favor of that? All right,
So we're for sure taking the next 2 weeks off.
yes,
Okay.
definitely, maybe three,
Potentially.
maybe three. Okay, public comment? Anybody on there?
Busy.
No public comment? Motion to adjourn? Get a second?
Dr. Ben.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.